The metal teeth of my key scraped against the lock that wouldn't turn. And I knew something was wrong before I even saw her approaching. Standing on the porch of the house I'd just bought. Mortgage papers still crisp in my briefcase. I felt that particular chill that comes when legal ownership means nothing to those who've claimed power. If you've ever stood at your own front door, keys in hand, and been told you don't belong there, drop a comment. I need to know I'm not alone in this nightmare. Susan Castillo's heels clicked against my walkway like a countdown to confrontation, her HOA president badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Mr. Chavez," she said, voice sharp as winter wind. "You need to leave. You can't live here." What happened next would reveal why 7 families before me had vanished from this neighborhood overnight, and why I might be number 8. The lock clicked open smoothly, but my relief lasted exactly 3 seconds before Susan Castillo's voice cut through the October afternoon. "Step away from that door, Mr. Chavez." I turned to find the HOA president positioned at the edge of my lawn like a general surveying enemy territory, her pearl necklace catching the light as she squared her shoulders for battle. If you've ever had your American dream interrupted by someone wielding a homeowners association like a weapon, drop a comment below. I need to know this special brand of hell isn't mine alone. Behind her stood 2 board members in formation, tablets and folders at the ready, and I suddenly understood why the previous owner had practically sprinted through closing. "Is there a problem?" I kept my tone professional, the same voice I used to calm panicked families in the ER. 15 years of nursing had taught me that the first person to lose control loses everything. Susan's smile belonged in a museum of passive aggression. "The problem, Mr. Chavez, is that you haven't been approved by the board to live in Willowbrook Estates. Until that approval is granted, you cannot take residence." She delivered this absurdity with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. And I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a practiced routine. "I closed 3 days ago. Everything's legal and finalized." I held up my keys, letting them catch the sunlight. "So unless you're telling me the title company, bank, and real estate attorneys all forgot to mention some magical HOA veto power, I'll be moving in as scheduled." The moving truck would arrive in 2 hours, and I'd already given notice on my apartment. This woman in her pressed blazer and perfect suburban armor wasn't going to derail 15 years of sacrifice with bureaucratic intimidation. Linda Patterson, clutching her tablet like holy scripture, jumped in with rehearsed precision. "Our CC&Rs clearly state that the board reserves the right to approve all new residents to maintain community standards. It's Article 7, Section 4, subsection..." I cut her off. "Does Article 7 override state property law? Because I'd love to see that legal precedent." Gerald Morrison, the 3rd member of their tribunal, shifted his weight nervously, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. Unlike his colleagues, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Susan's facade cracked slightly, revealing steel underneath. "We have a special relationship with local law enforcement, Mr. Chavez. They understand the importance of maintaining order in established communities." She produced her phone with the smooth motion of a gunslinger. "I'm giving you one opportunity to leave peacefully. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to report a trespasser." The word trespasser hung in the air like a threat, and I watched Gerald's face pale while Linda's fingers flew across her tablet, documenting every second. "You're going to call the police on a homeowner standing on his own porch." I pulled out my phone and started recording, making sure to capture the house number in frame. "Please, go ahead. I'm curious to see how you'll explain that to a dispatcher." The challenge was calculated. Either she'd back down, or she'd escalate in a way that would create evidence. In the ER. We called it controlled pressure push, just enough to reveal what's really broken. Susan's fingers moved across her phone screen with disturbing efficiency. 3 beeps. 9, 1, 1. and then her voice transformed into something victimized and frightened. "Yes, this is Susan Castillo at Willowbrook Estates. We have an individual refusing to leave private property at 47 Maple Court. He's becoming agitated, and we're concerned for our safety." And the lies flowed like water, and I kept recording as Linda angled her tablet to capture me from the most unflattering angle possible. Only Gerald seemed to shrink from the performance, his eyes darting between Susan and the street like he was calculating escape routes. "I'm documenting that HOA board members are making false reports to emergency services," I said clearly, ensuring my phone picked up every word. "I am Tyler Chavez, legal owner of this property, standing peacefully on my own porch with keys and closing documents in my possession." Susan covered her phone's microphone, her eyes narrowing. "Last chance to leave with your dignity intact. Mr. Chavez, this community has protected its standards for 20 years, and you won't be the one to change that." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, and I felt the familiar pre-crisis calm that came with years of emergency medicine. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be bullied off property I'd earned through countless double shifts and missed holidays. But as I watched Susan's satisfied expression and Linda's eager documentation, one question burned through my mind: how many others had stood exactly where I was standing? Keys in hand, before disappearing from Willowbrook Estates forever. The answer, I suspected, would be worth whatever fight was coming. The patrol car rolled up with practiced authority, and Officer Jose Hughes emerged with the measured movements of someone who'd responded to plenty of HOA drama. His hand rested casually on his belt as he surveyed the scene, me leaning against my own door, Susan standing rigid with righteousness, Linda still filming like this was breaking news, and Gerald trying to become invisible. "Someone called about a trespassing situation." Officer Hughes kept his tone neutral, but his eyes were already scanning, categorizing, deciding. Susan stepped forward, her voice shifting to concerned citizen mode. "Officer, thank you for responding so quickly. This man is refusing to leave private property despite multiple requests. We're simply trying to maintain the safety and standards of our community." She gestured toward me like I was Exhibit A in a crime scene. "He's been argumentative and refuses to acknowledge the authority of the Homeowners Association." The way she said authority made it clear she'd confused an HOA board position with actual governmental power. "Sir, can I see some identification?" Officer Hughes addressed me with professional courtesy, and I slowly reached for my wallet, keeping my movements deliberate and visible, as I handed over my driver's license. I also pulled out the folded closing documents from my jacket pocket. "Officer, I'm Tyler Chavez. I closed on this house 3 days ago. Here's the deed with my name on it, and here's my driver's license showing this as my legal address. I was attempting to enter my own town when these individuals told me I'm not allowed to live here." The officer examined my documents while Susan's confidence began to fracture. "He hasn't been approved by the board," she insisted, her voice climbing higher. "We have procedures, standards. You can't just let anyone move into a community like ours without proper vetting." Linda thrust her tablet toward the officer. "It's all in our bylaws. Article 7 clearly states." Officer Hughes held up a hand, his expression suggesting he'd heard this song before. "Ma'am, HOA bylaws don't supersede property rights. If Mr. Chavez owns this home, he has the right to enter it." Gerald finally found his voice, weak but revealing. "Susan, maybe we should discuss this at the next board meeting instead of—" She whirled on him with such venom that he stumbled backward. "Gerald, you voted on this. Don't you dare undermine the board's authority now." That slip, "you voted on this," caught my attention. They'd actually held a vote about preventing me from moving in. The implications sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. Officer Hughes handed back my documents, his decision made. "Mr. Chavez, you're free to enter your property. As for the HOA concerns, That's a civil matter to be resolved through proper channels, not emergency services. He turned to Susan with barely concealed irritation. Ma'am, filing false emergency reports is a crime. This man is clearly the legal owner attempting to access his property. That's not trespassing by any definition. Susan's face cycled through several shades of red, but she managed to maintain her composure. We'll be consulting with our legal team about this situation. Officer, the HOA has rights too. As the patrol car pulled away, Susan's mask finally slipped completely. You think you've won something here? This is just the beginning. We have ways of dealing with people who don't respect our community standards. She turned on her designer heel and marched away, Linda scurrying behind, still clutching her tablet. Only Gerald lingered, looking at me with something like apology or warning in his eyes. You should know, he said quietly, glancing over his shoulder. The last 7 families who tried to fight her. They didn't last 6 months. Then he too retreated, leaving me alone on my porch with keys that suddenly felt heavier than before. The moving truck's diesel engine rattled my new windows as Frank, the driver, caught my expression. HOA trouble. He didn't wait for an answer. My cousin lost 40 grand fighting one in Arizona. They wanted his palm tree removed. Said it was the wrong species for the neighborhood aesthetic. We hefted my couch through the door as he continued. Course, the board president's landscaping company happened to specialize in the right kind of palms. His knowing look suggested my situation wasn't unique, just another verse in suburbia's power ballad. 90 minutes into unloading. My phone buzzed. Pinnacle Property Management. The caller ID showed. Susan's enforcement arm. Shirley Alvarez's voice could have frozen antifreeze. Mr. Chavez, you have outstanding special assessments totaling $3,500. Utility interruption is scheduled for tomorrow, 8 a.m. I wedged the phone between shoulder and ear while guiding a bookshelf through the doorway. Assessments levied 60 days ago, before I owned the property. Her response came pre-packaged. Assessments attached to the property. Pay now or lose services. HOAs can't disconnect city utilities without a court order, I said, recognizing the bluff, but wondering what came next. Shirley's pause lasted 2 heartbeats too long. The board has alternative methods for encouraging compliance. I suggest you pay. The threat's vagueness made it more unsettling. What infrastructure had they built for harassment over 12 years of Susan's reign by evening? Towers of boxes filled my living room like cardboard monuments to disrupted dreams. A tentative knock interrupted my attorney search. Through the peephole, a young couple glancing nervously over their shoulders. I'm Amy. This is David, the woman whispered after I opened the door. 3 houses down. The Washingtons before you. Susan broke them in 4 months, claimed their daughter's tricycle violated vehicular storage codes. David added. The Morenos lasted 6 months. She fined them for excessive family gatherings when their grandchildren visited. Each family's story came with new details, escalating fines, manufactured violations, strategic targeting of vulnerabilities. Why doesn't anyone fight back? I asked. Amy's bitter laugh carried years of accumulated fear. The Johnsons tried. Susan buried them in legal fees, then spread rumors about structural damage to their house. It sat unsold for a year. They left quickly, Amy pressing a scrap of paper into my hand. Benjamin Bailey, former board member. He knows things. Their furtive exit reminded me of informants in a police state, which wasn't far from Willowbrook's reality. Morning brought theater of the absurd. I recorded from my window as a Pinnacle property truck circled the block 3 times, slowing at my house but never stopping. Intimidation choreographed for plausible deniability. At 8:15, still with power and water. I found an unstamped envelope in my mailbox. The violation notice inside showed amateur hour, backdated fines totaling $1,500. No proper service method, no certified mail tracking. They'd grown so comfortable with victims folding quickly that they'd abandoned legal procedure entirely. Benjamin Bailey called while I photographed their sloppy paperwork. Coffee shop on 3rd Street. 1 hour. Come alone. He sounded like a man confessing to a priest. I arrived early, claiming a corner booth with sight lines to both doors. Old habits from night shifts in rough neighborhoods. Benjamin entered precisely on time, carrying a folder like evidence of his own guilt. The Washingtons had a 5-year-old. He began, without preamble. Susan made that little girl try every morning, standing at their property line with a clipboard, documenting violations. The child stopped playing outside. His hands trembled around his coffee cup. I voted with her for 6 years, told myself it was about property values. He slid the folder across. Financial records. The board's been steering forced sales to preferred buyers. Shell companies that trace back to Susan's associates. 7 families. Mr. Chavez. All sold below market within 6 months. The papers revealed a pattern that turned my stomach. The Washingtons bought for $320, forced to sell for $240. The Morenos $350 to $260. Each property later flipped for massive profits. She's running a real estate manipulation scheme. I breathed. Benjamin nodded. Using HOA powers to force sales. Then her network swoops in. I have names, dates, LLC filings. But there's more. He glanced around nervously. 3 board members get kickbacks through consulting fees. Shirley Alvarez takes a cut for managing the harassment. Officer Hughes's brother-in-law owns one of the shell companies. Why come to me? I asked. Benjamin's eyes held the weight of conscience finally breaking through. Because you didn't run. You made her call the police. Forced documentation. You're the first one who might actually win. He stood abruptly. I was never here, but Mr. Chavez check the county tax records for 43 Maple Court. And document everything. Susan's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. He left me with a folder that felt heavier than my entire move, containing evidence that could bring down a 12-year empire built on destroyed families. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, absorbing the scope of what I'd stumbled into. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It was organized crime dressed in suburban respectability. Every page in Benjamin's folder revealed new connections, utility companies giving kickbacks for service threats that never materialized. Contractors paid to create violations where none existed. Even a private investigator used to dig up dirt on resistant homeowners. The infrastructure of intimidation had been refined over 12 years into a profit machine. My phone buzzed with a message from Frank the mover. Forgot to mention, guy at the gas station asked a lot of questions about you. Description matches your HOA president. Watch your back. So Susan had moved to intelligence gathering. I wondered how many moving companies had been pumped for information about previous families. How many small conversations had been weaponized into leverage. Driving home, I noticed a Pinnacle property vehicle parked 3 houses from mine. Engine running. Windows tinted. They wanted me to know I was being watched. Inside. I found another unstamped envelope wedged in my door, not even pretending to use proper mail anymore. This time. A notice about architectural violations, my moving boxes visible through windows, constituted unsightly storage. $500 fine. The desperation showed in their sloppiness. Real architectural committees required formal reviews. Not drive-by citations. I spent the afternoon creating what I'd later call the war room. Benjamin's documents went on one wall, connected with red string to my own growing collection. Financial records, property transfers, shell company registrations, a spiderweb with Susan Castillo at the center. The pattern was elegant in its simplicity. Identify vulnerable homeowners, manufacture violations, escalate harassment, force below-market sales, profit through predetermined buyers, 7 families in 8 years, Probably 20 million in manipulated equity. But something bothered me about Benjamin's final comment. 43 Maple Court was 4 houses down. A pristine colonial with perfect landscaping. County tax records showed it was owned by Susan Castillo, purchased 5 years ago for 60% of market value from the Nguyens, who'd coincidentally faced a storm of violations before selling. She'd victimized her own neighbors, then moved in to admire her handiwork. The audacity took my breath away. As darkness settled, I stood at my window watching the Pinnacle vehicle maintain its vigil. They thought surveillance would break me, like it had broken others, but they'd miscalculated. Every hour they sat there was another hour of evidence, another documentation of resources deployed, another sign of desperation. Tomorrow, I'd begin my counteroffensive. But tonight, I studied my enemy's infrastructure, mapping every connection, every weakness, every point where greed had made them sloppy. Susan Castillo had built an empire on other people's dreams. Time to show her what happened when someone refused to be another casualty. Monday's harassment arrived with military precision. 7 a.m. Water Department, 7:30 Electrical, 8 Code Enforcement. Each technician looked uncomfortable, performed unnecessary inspections, and left quickly. The 4th visitor broke script, a young health inspector who whispered, "I'm supposed to find violations. I won't, but others will. Check who signed your permits at closing." She left before I could respond, but her warning sent me to my closing documents. There it was, the final inspection signature belonged to Robert Haynes. Building Department. A quick search revealed he was Susan's brother-in-law. By noon, the attacks turned digital. My laptop screen flickered once, then died. Phone followed 30 seconds later. The surge pattern indicated targeted overload through the main panel, professional sabotage designed to look accidental. Michael Brooks, my neighbor, appeared as I checked the breaker box. "Happened to the Johnsons, too," he said, producing a voltage meter. "Watch this." He showed readings that spiked precisely every 45 minutes. Programmable surge timer, probably installed during your final inspection. We found the device in 20 minutes, a small box that Robert Haynes could have planted in seconds. "Been mapping their network for 2 years?" Michael said, pulling out a notebook filled with diagrams. "Susan's just the visible head. Her husband runs the property management company that handles foreclosure sales. Brother-in-law in building permits. Cousin in the water department. Son-in-law owns the landscaping company that finds all the violations." Each connection revealed how families were systematically destroyed. "But here's what they don't know I found," he continued, showing me a highlighted section. 3 weeks before each family breaks, large cash deposits hit certain accounts. They're betting on when people will crack. The afternoon brought an avalanche of violations, each more creative than the last. Grass height, ½ inch over limit. Mailbox wrong shade of black, porch light incorrect color temperature per subsection, 47B of aesthetic luminosity standards. The creativity might have been amusing if each didn't carry a $500 fine. But one violation stood out, a complaint about excessive indoor lighting after 10 p.m., filed at 11:47 p.m. last Tuesday. I'd been asleep by 9 that night. They were filing retroactive violations for things that never happened. I drove to Judith White's office using Michael's suggested route, 3 unnecessary turns to spot surveillance. Her building sat in the old downtown, deliberately outside HOA territory. "They're escalating faster with you," she said, reviewing my documentation. "Usually takes 2 weeks to hit electronics. You've got them scared." She pulled out a case file thick as a phone book. "I've been collecting evidence for 3 years. You're the 9th family, not the 7th. The Carters and Penas were scrubbed from records after they signed NDAs." She showed me depositions that painted a darker picture, families threatened with fabricated criminal charges, fake CPS reports, even planted evidence. "Why hasn't anyone stopped them?" I asked. Judith's expression hardened. "Because Susan's network extends into the DA's office. Every complaint gets buried. But you're different." She tapped Benjamin's folder. "This financial trail is new. If we can prove the profit motive, we shift from civil to criminal. RICO statutes apply to organized property fraud." She assigned homework document every interaction, every person involved, every penny of damages. "They'll try to break you this week. When that fails, they'll try to buy you. When that fails," she didn't finish, but her meaning was clear. Returning home, I found my water shut off despite paying all bills. The notice taped to my door cited, "Contamination concerns pending inspection. Pure fiction, but effective. No water meant no cooking, no shower, no basic dignity." They were tightening the screws. But they'd also made a mistake. The notice was signed by Thomas Utility Supervisor. No last name, no department, no contact information. Sloppy desperation. I photographed it and added it to my growing collection of procedurally defective documents. That night, I showered at the gym and returned to find my porch light shattered. Glass scattered precisely on my doormat. The message was clear: "We can reach you any time." But under the broken glass, I found something they hadn't intended, a receipt that must have fallen from someone's pocket. Henderson Security Consulting, with a charge for residential surveillance package. The timestamp showed 3 hours ago. They'd hired professionals to watch me, and one had gotten careless. I sat in darkness, eating cold sandwiches, planning my counteroffensive. Every attack revealed another piece of their operation. Every escalation exposed another conspirator. They thought they were hunting me, but I was mapping their entire ecosystem. Tomorrow, Judith would file our first legal response. Tonight, I documented everything by candlelight. My home a battlefield, but my resolve hardening with each violation. Susan's empire was built on fear and broken families. She was about to discover what happened when someone turned that fear into fuel. Tuesday's digital ambush arrived with surgical precision. Linda Patterson's post hit the neighborhood group at 3 a.m. Alert Tyler Chavez under investigation for previous HOA violations. The fiction came preloaded with 17 instant likes, including from Jennifer Nguyen, whose family had fled Willowbrook 5 years ago. Using dead residents and victims as sock puppets revealed a new low in Susan's tactics. I screenshot everything, noting the metadata that would later prove crucial: all 17 accounts logged in from the same IP address. Mitchell Graves arrived at 9 sharp with a 60-page lawsuit from concerned citizens of Willowbrook. Page 47 held the poison pill, an emergency injunction seeking immediate removal pending fitness evaluation. Judith White's response when I called was revealing: Graves owes Susan huge favors. Lost his license for 6 months last year. She got him reinstated through connections. This lawsuit is payback. The conspiracy grew wider with each thread pulled. Helen Martinez's rebellion sparked at noon. Called out their lies online. Now look. 3 violation notices, all time-stamped within minutes of her defense post. But Helen brought more than casserole and solidarity. She'd kept 12 years of records. Every family they've targeted, every fake violation. I'm done being silent. Her files contained a bombshell meeting minutes from 2015, where Susan explicitly stated the goal of curating resident demographics for optimal property values. The smoking gun of discriminatory intent. Michael's afternoon call carried urgency. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. 4-hour notice. Not 48. They're panicking. But his next words chilled me. Benjamin Bailey's in the hospital. Car accident yesterday. Right after meeting you. Brake line failure. Yes, the implied threat hung unspoken. They'd escalated from property crimes to potential violence. This wasn't just about real estate anymore. I prepared for the meeting like a prosecutor building a case. Not emotional appeals, but hard evidence arranged in devastating sequence. The IP address linking fake accounts. The timeline showing violations issued before supposed infractions. The property transfers Benjamin had documented. Helen's meeting minutes proving discriminatory intent. Each piece alone meant little. Together, they painted Susan as a criminal enterprise leader, not a suburban bureaucrat. The community center overflowed with bodies and tension. Susan had arranged the board table like a tribunal, elevating herself above the crowd. But her usual polished appearance showed cracks, smeared lipstick, coffee stain on her blazer, eyes darting constantly to the exits. Gerald Morrison sat apart from other board members. A file folder closed before him. Linda Patterson's hands shook as she set up the presentation screen. Susan's opening salvo abandoned subtlety entirely. Tyler Chavez represents an existential threat to everything we've built. Her PowerPoint included photos taken inside my home, through windows, clearly showing private spaces. The crowd stirred uneasily. Even supporters shifted as she displayed image after image of mundane activities framed as threats. Loading boxes aggressively, suspicious nighttime movements. The paranoia had consumed her completely. When she showed a photo of me meeting Benjamin at the coffee shop, labeled conspiring with disgraced former board member, Gerald Morrison finally snapped. Disgraced Benjamin resigned because you threatened his daughter. The room erupted. Susan screamed for order, but Gerald continued. I've kept quiet for 2 years, but enough Benjamin found out about the property scheme. You said you'd have his daughter investigated for drug possession if he didn't resign quietly. Susan's mask didn't slip. It shattered. Shut up. Gerald, you voted for everything, you took your cut, like everyone else. The admission hung in suddenly silent air. She'd just confessed to the entire scheme while being recorded by dozens of phones. Linda Patterson bolted for the exit, but tripped over her own equipment. The community's attention turned from me to the imploding board as years of suppressed suspicions crystallized into undeniable truth. I walked to the microphone during the chaos, placed my single folder down, and spoke into the noise. 9 families, 9 forced sales, 9 properties now owned by board members or associates. The evidence is here, documented and verified. But I'm not asking you to believe me. I looked directly at Susan, whose face had gone from red to ashen. I'm asking State Attorney Rebecca Thompson, who received copies of everything this morning. The final card played. I gathered my folder and walked out as Willowbrook's dictator realized her empire wasn't under siege. It had already fallen. The parking lot filled with residents fleeing the meeting's implosion. Helen Martinez grabbed my arm, tears streaming. You did it! 12 years of fear, and you ended it in 20 minutes. Behind us, sirens approached, not for me this time, but for those who'd weaponized a community against its own. Benjamin's sacrifice, whether accident or attack, hadn't been in vain. The revolution he'd started with a folder of evidence had just claimed its victory. My phone buzzed constantly as I drove home, neighbors sharing videos of Susan's complete meltdown after I'd left. Gerald Morrison had opened his own folder, revealing 2 years of recorded conversations where Susan detailed her schemes. I kept everything, he said in one video, because I knew someday someone would stand up to her. Every threat, every bribe, every family she destroyed. I have it all on tape. His conscience, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to show courage first. Back home, I found my property transformed. Neighbors had removed the HOA violation notices, leaving apology notes in their place. Amy and David sat on my porch with a bottle of wine and survivor's guilt. We should have spoken up sooner, Amy said, when the Washingtons were targeted, when the Nguyens fled, when Benjamin was forced out. We were cowards. But David shook his head. We were victims. There's a difference between cowardice and being terrorized into compliance. As we talked, more neighbors arrived, Stories poured out like water through a broken dam. Susan had threatened one family with fabricated code violations if they didn't vote her way. Another discovered their property taxes mysteriously increased until they supported her initiatives. A third found their business licenses under review after questioning HOA finances. Each revelation added layers to the criminal conspiracy that had masqueraded as community governance. Judith White called near midnight with updates that exceeded our best hopes. Rebecca Thompson's moving fast. FBI's involved now. This crosses into federal territory with the mail fraud and interstate commerce violations. They're freezing assets, seizing records. Susan tried to flee but got arrested at the airport. The speed suggested authorities had been building their own case, waiting for someone inside to break the wall of silence. We'd provided the crack that shattered everything. The week that followed felt like waking from a communal nightmare. State investigators interviewed every resident, uncovering decades of corruption. Susan's network crumbled as co-conspirators rushed to make deals. Shirley Alvarez admitted to taking bribes for false utility threats. Robert Haynes confessed to planting code violations during inspections. Even Officer Hughes's brother-in-law faced charges for the shell company purchases. The infrastructure of intimidation collapsed like diseased architecture. But the real victory came in smaller moments. Children played freely in yards where parents had feared HOA citations. Neighbors hosted gatherings without checking 37 subsections of entertainment regulations. The Washingtons called to say they were considering moving back, now that their daughter could ride her tricycle without Susan documenting violations. The community that fear built was becoming something else, a place where people protected each other instead of policing each other. 3 months later, I sat in my backyard hosting a barbecue for the reformed Willowbrook. Helen Martinez had become the new board president, running on a platform of transparency and sanity. Gerald Morrison, granted immunity for his cooperation, led a committee to review and eliminate absurd bylaws. The artificial luminosity standards were gone, along with grass height measurements and the fictional fitness for residency reviews. What remained was what HOAs should be, neighbors helping maintain shared spaces, not miniature dictatorships. Tyler the nurse had faced down corruption with the same methodical patience used to save lives. Document everything. Stay calm under pressure. Never let bullies see you break. The keys that had scraped in my lock that first day now opened a door to a home truly mine. In a neighborhood freed from 12 years of targeted terrorism. Susan Castillo's mugshot in the newspaper showed someone who'd forgotten that power stolen through fear is always temporary. Real community, built on respect and mutual support, endures. Wednesday morning arrived with eerie silence. No violation notices, no utility trucks, no surveillance vehicles. Gerald Morrison's knock at 7 a.m. confirmed my instincts. Benjamin's alive. We need to talk. In his car, Benjamin waited with his arm in a sling, very much breathing, despite the brake line, accident. At a diner 2 towns over, Benjamin pushed a single document across the sticky table. Bright future developments. They're buying Willowbrook piece by piece. The incorporation papers showed a Nevada shell company with one local signature, Judge Patricia Martinez, who'd ruled against every homeowner for 5 years. Your house is the last they need for commercial rezoning. Susan was just their weapon. Gerald pulled out a small drive. 200 hours of recordings. He clicked play on his phone. Susan's voice filled the space. The Penas are too ethnic. 5 violations should break them by Christmas. Another clip, Tyler Chavez is the linchpin. Whatever it takes. His hands shook as he stopped the playback. I recorded everything for 2 years, waiting for someone strong enough to use it. Back at my house, Judith White waited with FBI Special Agent Catherine Walsh. We've been building this case for 3 years, Walsh said, spreading photos across my kitchen table. 12 HOAs, red strings connecting faces to properties to shell companies. You provided the inside evidence we needed." She pointed to one photo, Senator Patricia Blackwood shaking hands with Bright Future's CEO. "She rewrote HOA law to protect their operations. This goes to Washington." Amy knocked as the agents prepared to leave. Behind her stood 15 neighbors. "We've been meeting in secret," she said. "The Willowbrook Survivors Group, every family they targeted who didn't run." The Carters carried boxes of manipulated tax assessments. The Silvas had discriminatory enforcement videos. Together, they'd built a parallel case to mine. "We were waiting for someone to light the match," David added. "You lit it." That evening's emergency community meeting felt like an exorcism. Helen Martinez opened with 3 words: "We were victims." Then she introduced Agent Walsh, who laid out the conspiracy with surgical precision. Linda Patterson entered under federal escort, her lawyer reading a prepared statement. But Linda herself broke from script. Sobbing, "I have videos of Susan celebrating each family she destroyed. I thought we were protecting property values. I helped destroy lives." She pulled a hard drive from her purse. Every board meeting for 8 years, every scheme, every victim. The room erupted as neighbors recognized their own persecution in Linda's footage. One video showed Susan toasting the Washington's departure. Another successful demographic improvement. In another, board members placed bets on how many violations would break the Johnsons. The systematic cruelty, preserved in Linda's obsessive documentation, transformed individual trauma into collective evidence. Benjamin stood painfully, addressing the crowd. "They wanted commercial development worth $50 million. Our homes were just obstacles." He held up architectural plans found in Susan's files. "Strip mall, luxury condos, our neighborhood erased for profit." The plans showed completion dates, assuming all current residents would be gone within 6 months. They almost succeeded. Agent Walsh asked for witnesses. Hands rose throughout the room, dozens of families ready to testify. But the night's most powerful moment came from quiet Gerald. "I participated in this evil. I can't undo that, but I can make sure everyone responsible pays." He turned to face his neighbors. "Including me. I'm waiving immunity. Prison is a small price for helping destroy lives. Walking home through streets Susan once ruled by fear. I found my property transformed. New porch lights blazed from every house. The wrong color temperature Susan had banned here, now shining in defiance. Michael Brooks intercepted me with news. Senator Blackwood's under investigation. 3 more HOAs contacted the FBI today. You started an avalanche." The following week brought Mitchell Graves to my door, sweating through his expensive suit. "I need to make a deal," he said, clutching a briefcase. Inside contracts showing Bright Future paid him $15,000 per family driven out, with bonuses for families with children. "They broke faster," he whispered, leaving the evidence and fleeing. Thursday, Rebecca Thompson herself appeared. "Your case broke open 6 others," the state attorney said. "Bright Future operated in multiple states, always the same pattern. But Willowbrook fought back." She showed congressional subpoenas being prepared. Senator Blackwood's banking records showed 23 payments from Bright Future subsidiaries. She literally sold laws. Friday evening brought Shirley Alvarez, no longer the ice-cold enforcer. "Susan had evidence of my son's juvenile record," she admitted, handing me a flash drive. "Every fraudulent utility threat, every false lien. I was a coward, but I'm done being a weapon." Her confession added another layer to the conspiracy's human cost. How many others had been blackmailed into compliance Saturday? Mike Stevens called from across the country. "Heard you did what I couldn't," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I'm flying in to testify. Kept everything from my battle. Knew someday someone would need it." His delayed courage added weight to our case. Sunday arrived with something unprecedented, A genuine block party. The Washingtons had returned. Their daughter's tricycle leading a parade of children. Benjamin manned the grill despite his healing arm, while Judith helped neighbors understand their rights. Helen had turned violation notices into origami birds, hanging them as decorations, from weapons to art. She laughed. Even Gerald appeared, quietly serving food as penance began. I stood on the same porch where Susan had tried to deny my existence, watching a community choose healing over hatred. Agent Walsh stopped by with final tallies. 43 indictments so far. Bright Futures executives, corrupt officials, compromised judges. You exposed a cancer we've been hunting for years. She paused at my door. Most people would have sold and run. Why didn't you? I thought of the 15 years saving for this house, the dreams attached to these keys. Running rewards bullies. Fighting back protects the next family. As night fell over Willowbrook, porch lights blazed in defiant variety, warm white, cool blue, amber gold. Each bulb declared independence from aesthetic tyranny. My phone buzzed with messages from HOAs across the country, asking for advice, sharing their own struggles, building networks of resistance. The keys in my pocket felt heavier now, weighted with not just my own victory, but the hope of countless others facing their own Susan Castillos. The revolution that began on my porch had spread beyond Willowbrook's borders, carrying a simple message: your home is your castle, and no tyrant in a blazer can change that fundamental right. The war room materialized in my dining room over 72 hours. Judith White commanded one end of the table. Legal books stacked like fortifications. Agent Walsh occupied the other. Federal resources at her fingertips. Between them, evidence grew into mountain ranges, recordings, videos, financial documents, witness statements. Monday morning, we file on 3 fronts, Judith announced, drawing columns on a whiteboard. Civil RICO for the conspiracy, fair housing for discrimination patterns, criminal fraud for the property scheme, one coordinated attack. Benjamin arrived Monday with banker's boxes, his good arm straining. Found their mistake, he said, spreading wire transfer records. Every forced sale, same routing number, same receiving account. He traced the pattern with his finger. Citizens First Bank, account ending in 479, 43 properties. All profits flowing to one destination. Walsh photographed each page. That's what we needed. Single point of convergence for the money trail. Gerald's recordings provided the human element. He queued up audio from his phone Susan at a board celebration, wine-drunk and boasting. The Inuyans netted us $200,000. The Washingtons, $150. Tyler Chavez's property will clear $300,000 minimum. Then Linda's voice. Should we increase violations for the fall quarter? Susan's response chilled the room. Target families with children. They break faster. Gerald stopped the playback. 200 hours like this. They discussed destroying families like quarterly earnings. Tuesday brought Shirley Alvarez with Pinnacle Property Management's secrets. She placed 3 training manuals on the table, maximizing compliance through pressure. Creating violation opportunities. Defensive documentation strategies. Page 47, she said, opening the first manual. Instructions for photographing properties to manufacture violations. Angle techniques, lighting tricks, selective framing. The manual included sample photos showing how normal properties could be made to look neglected. We trained HOA boards nationwide. Same methods, same goals. Mitchell Graves arrived Wednesday carrying evidence of the judicial corruption. Every influenced ruling, he said, unpacking files. Judge Martinez, 16 cases, all HOA victories. Judge Thompson, 12 cases, same pattern. Judge Blackstone, 23 cases over 5 years. He produced payment records, consulting fees, flowing from Bright Future to judicial campaign funds. They bought the entire system, every appeal doomed before filing. Michael Brooks connected the pieces Thursday afternoon. 17%, he announced, unrolling county maps marked with red dots. That's how much residential property Bright Future now controls through forced sales. The dots clustered in specific patterns, middle-class neighborhoods near commercial corridors. They're not random. Look. He overlaid development plans. Every cluster sits on future commercial zones. They're stealing homes to build strip malls. The scope crystallized when Amy coordinated a video call with other affected HOAs. Desert Views in Arizona had lost 15 families. Maple Gardens in Colorado, 23. Oak Hills in Nevada, 11. Each told identical stories: escalating harassment, impossible violations, forced sales to shell companies. We're building a national database, Amy reported. 63 HOAs identified so far, all using Willowbrook's playbook. Friday, Helen Martinez returned from the state capitol with legislative momentum. 3 representatives want to sponsor reform bills, she reported. Mandatory transparency, criminal penalties for HOA harassment, homeowner Bill of Rights. She handed out draft legislation titled the Willowbrook Act. Your suffering becomes their protection. But the week's most damaging evidence came from Linda Patterson's complete files. Her obsessive documentation included something no one expected: meeting minutes from Bright Future's executives. She recorded everything, her lawyer explained as Linda sat silently, including private strategy sessions she wasn't supposed to attend. The recordings revealed discussions of Phase 2, converting entire neighborhoods into corporate-owned rental districts. 20-year timeline, 70% conversion target. Home ownership becomes historical anomaly. Judith integrated each revelation into our filing strategy. Susan was middle management in a housing conspiracy, she explained, showing the lawsuit structure. Bright Future at the top, corrupt judges and legislators as enablers, HOA boards as weapons, property management companies as enforcers. The visualization looked like organized crime because it was. Monday. We name everyone. Personal liability, no corporate shields. Saturday night. We held final preparations. The evidence filled 47 boxes, each labeled and cross-referenced. Witness statements from 37 families. Financial records showing $22 million in stolen equity. Recordings proving conspiracy. Training manuals documenting systematic methods. Pre-dawn arrests begin Monday, Walsh confirmed. 17 conspirators. Simultaneous raids. Asset freezes already approved. I stood among the boxes that transformed my dining room into Justice's staging ground. Each document represented a family's destruction and potential redemption. The keys that had started this journey sat on the table, surrounded by proof that ordinary people could dismantle extraordinary corruption. We'd built our weapons from truth, courage, and meticulous documentation. Monday would unleash them all. The team dispersed near midnight, leaving me alone with the evidence of Willowbrook's nightmare and awakening. Through my window, I could see porch lights blazing in defiant variety across the neighborhood. Each bulb declared independence from the aesthetic tyranny that had masked something far darker. In 48 hours, the reckoning would begin. Those who'd weaponized community against its own members would discover that justice, properly documented, cuts deeper than any violation notice ever could. Monday arrived with coordinated precision. At 5 a.m., federal agents swept through Willowbrook and 3 counties beyond. By 7, 17 conspirators sat in custody. Susan Castillo's mugshot dominated local news by 8. But the true reckoning would come at 9. In a packed federal courtroom where Judge Catherine Brennan, brought in from another district to ensure impartiality, would hear our emergency motions. I entered the courthouse flanked by Judith White and 37 families who'd refused to stay silent. The Washingtons had driven through the night from their exile. The Nguyens flew in from California. Even the Pinas, who'd fled to Mexico, appeared via video link. Each face represented survival against a system designed to break them. Gerald Morrison sat with the prosecution, having chosen accountability over immunity. His presence reminded everyone that justice included those who'd eventually chosen right. The defense table told its own story. Susan, in orange jumpsuit, her perfect suburban armor replaced by federal restraints. Mitchell Graves beside his own attorney, looking hollow. Shirley Alvarez on the prosecution's side now, her cooperation agreement trading testimony for leniency. Linda Patterson between two federal marshals, her beloved tablet replaced by handcuffs. The HOA board that had terrorized a community reduced to defendants awaiting judgment. Prosecutor Rebecca Thompson opened with devastating simplicity. Your Honor, what we present today is organized crime dressed in suburban respectability. She clicked a remote, and the courtroom screen filled with evidence never seen before. Email from Susan Castillo to Bright Future executives. Dated last January, Phase 2 ready for implementation. 12 communities identified. Projected returns $60 million in 18 months. The scope stunned even those of us who'd lived through Phase 1. When Susan's attorney objected to prejudicial characterization, Judge Brennan's response was sharp. Counselor, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. The prosecution is being restrained. Continue. Ms. Thompson. The judge's tone made clear she'd seen enough to know suburban privilege wouldn't protect these defendants. Gerald Morrison took the stand first, his shame palpable. I participated in destroying 9 families, he began, voice steady despite trembling hands. He produced bank records the FBI hadn't yet seen. These aren't just my bonuses. Look at the memo lines. Each deposit showed a family name, Washington removal bonus, Nguyen completion payment, Pena expedition fee. The casualness of labeling blood money chilled the courtroom. We celebrated each forced sale with champagne. Susan called them harvests. He played a recording from a board meeting 3 months ago. Susan's voice filled the courtroom. Tyler Chavez represents our biggest opportunity yet. His property anchors the entire north section. Without it, Phase 2 stalls. Another board member asked, "What if he won't break?" Susan's response was immediate. Everyone breaks. Escalate to utility disruption. Employment interference. Whatever it takes. $300,000 minimum profit justifies extreme measures. Linda Patterson followed, her testimony bringing visual evidence. I recorded everything because I believed we were heroes, she said, voice breaking. The prosecution played her video from a training summit Susan had organized. The screen showed Susan at a whiteboard, diagramming harassment strategies. The key is layered pressure, Susan explained to rapt board members from multiple HOAs. Violations create stress. Social isolation amplifies it. Legal threats maximize it. The formula works every time. But Linda's most damaging evidence was video she'd taken secretly, fearing Susan's methods had gone too far. This is from 6 months ago, she said. The video showed Susan meeting with someone identified only as Mr. Black. Their conversation revealed the conspiracy's true reach. Senator Blackwood's legislation passed, Mr. Black reported. HOAs now have enhanced enforcement powers. Phase 3 can begin once Willowbrook completes. Susan's response, give me 6 months. Every holdout will be gone. Shirley Alvarez provided the financial architecture testimony. I managed violation services for 23 HOAs. She stated, producing contracts none of us had seen. But these aren't the real agreements. She revealed hidden addendums showing kickback structures, profit-sharing arrangements, and something called demographic optimization bonuses, extra payments for removing specific ethnicities. Bright Future paid double for removing immigrant families, triple for households with disabilities. They called it community curation. Agent Walsh presented federal evidence gathered through warrants executed that morning. "We seized servers from Bright Future headquarters at dawn," she announced. They contained a database tracking every homeowner in targeted communities. Credit scores, immigration status, family medical conditions, employment details. She displayed screenshots showing my own entry: Tyler Chavez, working class, single, no local support network, vulnerability rating high, estimated breaking point 90 days. The database revealed entries for hundreds of families across multiple states, each rated for removal potential. The Washingtons, African American family with young child, use safety concerns angle. The Nguyens, recent immigrants, use language barrier and authority fear. The Penas, elderly, Spanish-speaking, use complex legal threats. Each entry showed how prejudice had been systematized into profit algorithms. Michael Brooks testified as an expert witness, presenting analysis that revealed the conspiracy's mathematical precision. They didn't just steal homes, he explained, showing charts of forced sales. They manipulated entire markets. By creating chaos in targeted neighborhoods, they suppressed values across zip codes. Properties they couldn't force sell still lost value, creating buying opportunities for shell companies. His data showed potential losses exceeding $100 million across all affected areas. The afternoon brought Bright Future executives attempting damage control. CEO Martin Blackstone claimed complete ignorance of local implementation methods. But Thompson destroyed his defense with emails from his own account. Willowbrook returns exceeding all projections. Whatever Susan's doing, bottle it for nationwide deployment. Another email celebrated demographic improvements yielding superior returns. His typed words convicted him more thoroughly than any testimony could. Susan finally took the stand, initially maintaining her composure. "I dedicated 12 years to improving Willowbrook," she began, voice steady. Every action was to protect property values and community standards. But Thompson's cross-examination shattered her facade within minutes. "Ms. Castillo, please read this email you sent to Bright Future." Thompson displayed the message on screen. Susan's voice faltered as she read, "The Chavez problem requires immediate solution. Working-class contamination threatens entire operation." Thompson pressed, "What did you mean by contamination?" Susan's face flushed. "People who don't maintain standards, who bring down the neighborhood tone." "What specifically about Mr. Chavez violated standards?" Thompson's question hung in the air. Susan's control finally snapped. "Everything. His work truck in the driveway, his irregular hours, the way he dressed. He was wrong for Willowbrook." Her voice rose to a shriek. "I built that community. I decided who belonged these people. Immigrants, minorities, blue-collar workers. They were weeds in my garden." Her attorney tried to silence her, but Susan's rage had taken control. The Nguyens with their foreign babble, the Washingtons thinking their black child could play freely on our streets, the Penas speaking Spanish at the mailbox. They were destroying everything. She turned to the gallery, eyes wild. "I saved Willowbrook from becoming another ghetto, and this is my thanks. Arrested like a common criminal." Judge Brennan gavelled for order as the gallery erupted. When silence returned, Susan was still ranting. "Phase 3 would have cleansed entire counties. We'd have restored America to its proper demographics." Senator Blackwood understood the vision. Her attorney physically pulled her back to her seat. But the damage was complete. She'd confessed not just to crimes, but to the hatred driving them. Judge Brennan's ruling came with controlled fury. "In 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such systematic evil wrapped in bureaucratic procedure. The defendants weaponized the American dream against Americans." She addressed each defendant individually. remanding all major conspirators without bail. The dissolution of Willowbrook Estates HOA is immediate and permanent. A federal monitor will oversee restitution to victims. Turning to the gallery, her voice softened. To the families who survived this persecution, your courage exposed a cancer in our communities. Mr. Chavez, your refusal to surrender your home triggered justice for thousands. The court recognizes this service to democracy itself. She paused, looking at the defense table. The defendants discovered that in America, neither corporate wealth nor suburban respectability places anyone above the law. As marshals led defendants away, Susan's final screams echoed through marble halls. I made Willowbrook perfect. The families in the gallery stood as one, not in respect for her, but for their own survival. Outside the courthouse, no lengthy interviews were needed. Helen Martinez captured it perfectly. Today, home means what it always should have, a place where every American belongs. The revolution that began with a key and a lock had ended with justice under law. Willowbrook was finally free. 6 months after Judge Brennan's ruling, I stood in my backyard, watching the Washington's daughter Emma teaching other children to ride bicycles. The same sidewalk where Susan had documented her violations now hosted a bike parade every Saturday. Mrs. Washington caught my eye and raised her coffee mug in silent gratitude. They'd returned to a neighborhood transformed, where children's laughter replaced the whisper of surveillance. The legal aftermath had moved with unprecedented speed. Susan Castillo received 25 years federal time for racketeering, fraud, and civil rights violations. Her final courtroom appearance made national news when she screamed about demographic purity while being dragged away. Mitchell Graves got 15 years and disbarment. Multiple bright future executives faced similar sentences. Senator Blackwood's corruption trial was set for next spring, her legislative legacy already being dismantled by emergency statutes protecting homeowners from HOA abuse. Gerald Morrison's path proved more complex. He'd pled guilty to fraud, but received probation due to his cooperation. I found him one morning repainting the Nguyen's fence. Part of his court-ordered restitution wasn't just financial, but physical labor helping families he'd harmed. I can't undo what I did, he said, not meeting my eyes. But maybe I can build something better from the wreckage. The Nguyens. With Grace I couldn't have managed. Brought him water and worked alongside him. Linda Patterson's journey toward redemption took a different route. Under house arrest, she'd started a blog documenting HOA corruption nationwide. Her insider knowledge, combined with genuine remorse, created a resource for families facing similar persecution. I was a true believer, she wrote in one post. I thought we were protecting paradise. Instead, we were building hell for our neighbors. Her YouTube channel, where she analyzed HOA documents for red flags, had helped dozens of families recognize early warning signs. The financial restitution exceeded everyone's expectations. Bright Future's assets, frozen and liquidated, created a $100 million fund for victims across 12 HOAs. The Washingtons received full compensation for their losses, plus damages. The Nguyens could finally pursue their dream of opening a restaurant without fear of cultural smells being weaponized against them. The Penas returned from Mexico with enough settlement to retire properly. Even families who'd fled years ago received checks with formal apologies from the federal monitor. But money couldn't restore lost years or erased trauma. I learned this during our monthly support meetings, where survivors gathered to process what we'd endured. Dr. Patricia Kim, a therapist who'd volunteered her services, helped us understand the lasting effects of sustained harassment. You survived psychological warfare, she explained. The hypervigilance, the document hoarding, the fear of authority. These are normal responses to abnormal cruelty. Slowly, We learned to trust our neighborhoods again. Willowbrook itself underwent radical transformation, without an HOA. We formed a voluntary neighborhood association with one rule: every decision required 75% approval from all residents, not just those who showed up. Helen Martinez led the group with radical transparency. All meetings streamed online, all finances public, all votes recorded. Never again, she said at our first gathering, will a small group dictate how others live. The physical changes came naturally once fear lifted. The Silvas painted their house brilliant yellow, a color Susan had banned as aesthetically offensive. The Johnsons installed the solar panels they'd wanted for years. My own contribution was simpler. I replaced the wrong porch light Susan had cited with an even brighter LED that blazed defiantly every night, across the neighborhood. Diversity bloomed where conformity had been mandated. Amy and David emerged as unexpected community leaders, organizing events that celebrated, rather than regulated, differences. Their monthly potlucks became legendary. Mrs. Nguyen's spring rolls next to Mr. Johnson's barbecue. Mrs. Pena's tamales beside my amateur attempts at baking. We ate in the community center, where Susan had once held her tribunals, transforming a space of judgment into one of joy. The ripple effects spread beyond Willowbrook. The Chavez case, as legal textbooks would later call it, sparked nationwide reform. 12 states passed emergency legislation limiting HOA powers. The Federal Homeowners Rights Act, inspired by our ordeal, ensured no association could deny residents based on ownership documents. Law schools added courses on property rights and discrimination. Susan's training videos became evidence in dozens of other cases, her methods helping convict similar conspiracies. Benjamin Bailey, fully healed from his accident, established a nonprofit helping HOA abuse victims, using his insider knowledge and our case documents. He'd already assisted 300 families in recognizing and resisting illegal harassment. Every family saved justifies my years of silence, he told me during a visit. I can't change my past, but I can protect others' futures. His foundation, funded partly by his own restitution payments, provided free legal consultation to targeted homeowners. Judith White's role in our victory launched her into national prominence. She appeared before Congress advocating for stronger property protections, testified in multiple states about HOA reform, and wrote the definitive legal guide to homeowner rights. But she still made time for Willowbrook, attending our neighborhood gatherings and reminding us that justice came not from her expertise, but from our courage to fight back. A year after that first confrontation, I hosted a gathering for everyone who'd made our freedom possible. Agent Walsh, now heading a federal task force on property fraud, brought news that our case had led to 47 convictions nationwide. Rebecca Thompson, promoted to State Attorney General, spoke about systemic change our resistance had triggered. Even Officer Hughes attended, apologizing for his initial response and sharing how he'd retrained his department to recognize HOA harassment. As sunset painted the sky, I stood where Susan had first denied my right to exist in my own home. The keys in my pocket, the same ones that had started everything, felt different now. They'd unlocked more than a door. They'd opened a path to justice for thousands. Around me, children played while parents chatted across fence lines that divided property, but not community. The Washington's daughter Emma rode past on her bicycle, streamers flying, unafraid of arbitrary rules or documented violations. Michael Brooks raised a toast as darkness settled, and our wrong porch lights blazed in glorious variety. To Tyler Chavez, who remembered that we the people includes all the people. But I redirected the toast to everyone present, the families who'd endured, the officials who'd listened, the neighbors who'd finally stood together. Willowbrook had been freed not by one person's courage, but by collective refusal to let tyranny hide behind bureaucracy. That night, as guests departed and quiet returned to streets once patrolled by suburban spies. I sat on my porch, reflecting on the journey. 15 years of saving for this house. But the true investment had been standing ground when standing seemed impossible. The American dream wasn't just about owning property. It was about communities brave enough to ensure everyone could pursue their own dreams without fear. My phone buzzed with a message from a family in Oregon facing similar harassment. Tomorrow, I'd share our documents, connect them with Benjamin's foundation, help them build their own resistance. The revolution that began with a key and a lock had become a movement, proving that ordinary people armed with truth and courage could dismantle extraordinary corruption. Willowbrook was free, and its freedom lit beacons for others still fighting in the shadows of HOA tyranny. The keys rested in my palm, warm from my pocket, heavy with purpose. Once, they'd represented only my dreams. Now they carried the weight of every family protected by our precedent. Every child who could play without fear. Every homeowner who knew their rights couldn't be violated by petty tyrants. I locked my door to my house, in our neighborhood, and went inside. Home at last.